Welcome everyone to the AI panel discussion, which is produced for the Bezos Earth Fund's AI for Climate and Nature Grand Challenge. The Grand Challenge is exploring new ideas for multiplying the impact of climate and nature efforts using modern AI, and we're going to talk a bit about modern AI today. Just by way of introduction, my name is Rebecca Meyer. I'm an engagement manager at Luminary Labs. Luminary Labs is a strategy and innovation consultancy based in New York, and we're supporting the Bezos Earth Fund in the design and administration of the Grand Challenge. Today's session will be a discussion among three experts who you should see on your screen, who are working in AI. The conversation will explore how AI can address climate change and nature law, some of the opportunities and challenges of that endeavor. For a little bit of housekeeping, note that the session is being recorded. This session will be published on the Grand Challenge website following today's discussion. And my colleagues from Luminary Labs are here on the back end. They'll be dropping in relevant links into the chat throughout. Given the volume of interest, we have closed the chat for this webinar, but if you have questions about anything that you hear today or about the Grand Challenge, you can reach out to the Grand Challenge team at hello@aiforclimateandnature.org, and someone will get back to you. All right, so we'll get started with introductions. I'll let each panelist introduce themselves, and we'll start first with Amin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Glad you all can join. Looking forward to a really fun and interesting conversation with my colleagues here. My name is Amin Rahman-Shariki. I'm the Director of AI and Data Strategies here at the Bezos Earth Fund, and leading this AI for Climate and Nature Grand Challenge with the help of Luminary Labs. A brief background. Prior to coming on to the Bezos Earth Fund, I was a senior principal scientist at NVIDIA. And then prior to that, I had many different roles, such as Chief Analytics Officer for the City of New York, worked in the Obama administration. But what I would say is briefly is that all of my technology roles always actually were driven by some sort of impact requirement or focus and vision. And so that is really one of the things that help really drive the vision and mission for this Grand Challenge, which is impact in climate and nature using AI.
Okay, I'm Lauren Bennett. I am the Director of Spatial Analysis and Data Science at Esri. Esri, we are a geographic information system software company, and I was really excited about the opportunity to work with Amin and the Bezos Earth Fund on the landscape assessment about the applications of AI in the climate and nature space. That's part of the resources for the Grand Challenge. And I was really excited about getting involved in general because I'm really passionate about, and I think that the GIS community and kind of the community of folks thinking spatially about these problems are particularly well suited to be really deeply involved, because it's really so much about impact. I was really enthused about the fact that this challenge has such a focus on impact and has such a focus on not just the technology for technology's sake, or a problem looking for a tool looking for a problem, but really about making a difference on the ground. And my experience with the GIS community, who I'm sure many of you are on the call or work with folks in that community. It's really an exciting place where the science and the technology really kind of hits the ground running and makes a big impact and really drives decisions. So very excited to be here and talk about all of that.
Hi all, my name is Patrick Buchma. I'm an artificial intelligence engineer at the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Seattle. I'm also the head of the environmental artificial intelligence team. My background before AI2 is had a variety of roles leading applied artificial intelligence teams. And I came from academia originally, so I did my PhD in brain decoding. I specialize in brain decoding. But like Amen, most of my career has been searching for roles that are impact oriented and particularly with artificial intelligence. So very excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, we're very fortunate to have the three of you here to discuss this topic. So let's dive in and start first with the AI opportunity. So while AI has demonstrated potential in addressing climate change and nature loss, some of the most promising applications of AI remain underutilized. I think that's sort of a central element to why we are administering the AI for Climate and Nature Grand Challenge. Amen, I'd like to start with you. What are some of the most impactful but overlooked opportunities for AI to contribute to these critical areas of climate change and nature loss? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. So, Lauren alluded to, talked about the landscape assessment report, and I can imagine everyone listening in has already read the report. There's some overarching themes that came out of that report that are very important. One is scale. So what we've seen across academic institutions and other organizations is that people have been dipping their toe in this space of using AI and climate and nature for impact, and doing some good work. But there's a lot of challenge in terms of scaling that work, such that it's more enterprise and has the far-reaching impact that we know is needed in order to have the effect on the Earth the way that we want in this decisive decade. And so I think one is scale. The second is access to and adoption of advanced and modern technologies. Oftentimes, those are out of many on-the-ground implementers' reach. We're talking about the organizations that have been taking on these challenges of solving the climate crisis and the nature crisis without AI. And so oftentimes for adoption is fairly challenging. And so we've seen challenges there. I would say that really the thing that we're really using this AI Grand Challenge for is to expand how we're thinking about using AI in climate and nature. So we did the landscape assessment to understand what the state of the art is, what's the signal and the noise, who's doing good work. But really, success here is seeing big ideas and interesting ideas, and no longer thinking about the way private sector wants us to think about AI, which is a product, AI equals ChatGPT, but really thinking about AI as a tool for discovery. And so it's really about what are the things that we haven't thought about? What are the things that we haven't been doing that now with AI we can? And so I think to answer your question, the short version is really thinking about where we can use AI as a tool for discovery and not just a tool.
Lauren, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this question of sort of high impact but overlooked opportunities for AI to contribute.
I mean, honestly, I think it's almost exclusively high impact and not yet realized opportunities. We're seeing, I think right now what we see a lot of is, and it's very useful, and it is changing the way people do their work. A lot of the ability to automate things like object detection. We're turning imagery into data. We're turning remotely sensed data into information that we can use to make decisions, and that's useful. And AI has made that possible, right? There was just this treasure trove of data that we were collecting, and we weren't really doing anything with it, and now we are. But really, that's data creation. That's not solving big problems. And so I think that that's important. That's actually, I think, a prerequisite to where we go next, because we need the data to do that. And so we've done that and we're doing that. And AI is critical in doing that. But I think the next big space, and I think that I'm probably going to sound like a broken record throughout this panel discussion, but I think the big opportunity is for the folks that are deeply knowledgeable about AI to really understand the problems that experts in areas like climate and nature have, and for them to really work together to solve those problems. I think that where we're at right now is we're kind of applying very kind of specific algorithms that are very obviously useful to things, and we've got experts in climate and nature who are able to do that because it's kind of cut and dry. Like, it's really obvious how you apply this tool to solve this, to answer this question. But the bigger questions aren't going to be solved by the climate and nature folks or the AI folks all by themselves. And so to me, the biggest opportunity is for us to finally get to a point where now we're building these collaborative teams that are able to tackle the big problems that our world is facing, that our society is facing, and that AI is really, really well suited to solve, because of the way that it can bring together all of these disparate data sets and look at the world in kind of a different way that's less prescriptive.
Patrick, any final thoughts on the AI opportunity here that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think, in general, there are a lot of applications in AI where the advancements are incremental. And I think the interesting opportunity for us, and what is special and unique about AI, is that it can be transformative when appropriately applied. And of course, that's very challenging. Like, it's not obvious how to apply it in such a way that will be transformative as opposed to incremental. But if you think about, impact-oriented design from the start, right? When you're creating the project or working on a new initiative, and how you can leverage AI not as just another tool, in the toolkit. I think that's when you start to see, significant possibilities, and that's what we're excited about.
Yeah. Before we move further in the conversation and deeper into this topic, Amin, maybe this is a question for you. We talk a lot about modern AI as part of the Grand Challenge. We're referencing AI throughout, obviously, this discussion. I think when a lot of people hear modern AI, what they think of first is generative AI. But modern AI encompasses quite a bit more than that. Can you speak to what's included in modern AI?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good question, and I think that I want to be careful about trying to define modern AI, because it really depends on who and what, right? And so, who's doing the implementation and in what domain and in what space. And so, just so that I can at least put an answer out there, I think there's two ways to think about modern AI. One is from the technology perspective, and that, so we could talk about foundation models, which are relatively new. We can talk about sort of boutique, if you will, or advanced sort of deep learning models. We can talk about with respects to my former company, NVIDIA, and the power of accelerated compute, and the importance of training models and how you train those models and the energy efficiency put into those models. All of that, it reminds me of, there's a difference between the Rivian of today and some old, sort of gas guzzler of yesteryear, they both will get you from A to B, but one safer, more efficiently, and quicker, right, than the other. And so that is also modern AI. But then I also will throw in there, outside of the technology, the actual capability itself, modern AI, a lot of the conversations we're seeing are around openness of the models, right? You see Meta really, really taking a big step in terms of making these models, making their models open to a large extent. Hugging Face, platforms like Hugging Face are sort of embracing this open community space. That's a very modern sort of thing. This sharing and this openness, transparency is important and key when we're talking about modern AI. And then something that we'll touch on a little bit here in this conversation is around ethics, being thoughtful around how to be ethical when building AI teams, but then also how to be thoughtful around the AI itself being deliberate and ethical, right? And so all of that encompasses a lot of the key things that we think about when we're talking about modern AI.
You teed up this next portion of the discussion quite nicely. So let's move into that. The grand challenge, as we've talked about, the opportunity that that we're seeking to seize on and really move forward in. We're seeking solutions that will drive impact in climate and nature on the ground. But key to this effort is also considering the broader impact of specific AI solutions. And so on this topic, Lauren, I'd like to start with you. What do you see as some of the challenges of using AI as a tool to address a societal or, in this case, an environmental problem?
Sure. And I think even in like the question, right? It's like, are there environmental problems that aren't also societal, right? Do these things, can they exist in a vacuum? We didn't get where we are in a vacuum, and we're certainly not going to get out of it in a vacuum. And so I think that, yeah, there's a lot of challenges. I think the grand challenge is set up really nicely to, at least in its vision, limit some of them, right? I think one of the biggest challenges is kind of being a solution looking for a problem, being a tool, an algorithm, an approach looking for a problem, and not having at the kind of forefront being grounded in the questions that you're asking and the way that the answers to those questions will actually be used on the ground. I see really often it's like, oh, what if we could build this thing and it could do this, and it's like, but how would somebody use it to actually drive a decision? Like, what policy is it going to impact? How is it going to lead to funding of the right projects? Like, is the person who's going to use that to drive a decision actually involved from the beginning in building out that solution in the first place? Because that's really one of the important ways that we ensure that it's actually used to make an impact. And so I think being kind of impact focused from the beginning gets around some of the big challenges that we face there. I think that who's at the table and how we think about whose voice and perspective is really important is also a big challenge, and something that I don't think we see enough of. And I'm really optimistic because I know that that's definitely something that this grand challenge has at its heart, is the goal of seeing interdisciplinary teams that have diverse perspectives, where you've got the right AI folks, but also the right climate and nature folks. Also, lots of times we're talking about solving problems that will deeply impact communities on the ground. And so bringing in those community perspectives, making sure that, if we're talking about extreme heat, there's someone in the room who has experienced extreme heat in the way that that we're trying to understand and to remediate, and what that looks like. So I think that, and to be honest, and this is, so I think that in a lot of ways, none of these are actually particularly unique to AI. This is something that we should always be thinking about when we're building solutions, when we're doing analysis, when we're applying the latest methods in technology to solve a problem. You know, all of these things apply to all of those, right? There are AI specific things, you know, how much energy are we using to train models? Those things are also very important. Who has access to those models are also very important. But many of these things are kind of universal to the solutions that we're building across the board.
Yeah, I want to add a bit about, you know, practically how you might think about achieving this. And, you know, in many ways, it should be relatively obvious, right, to build, you know, humanity-centered design, right? That seems like a, you know, kind of obvious. And it sort of reminds me of the concept in healthcare, like evidence-based medicine, right? Like, what is the alternative, right? And so when we think about humanity-centered design, what we think about is like putting the user at the center, the stakeholders of the technology at literally the center of the design process, so that you are building the appropriate technology, right? As opposed to like an afterthought, right? You don't want to design in a vacuum, or, you know, in the ivory tower and not even know whether your technology is effective in the first place. So this is a seemingly obvious point, and yet it's quite profound and rarely applied. And so, you know, put the users of the technology, put whoever the stakeholders are, you know, at the center and design for them, you know, from the outset. And that ends up being a very different way of thinking and a very different way of building AI than what is the norm.
I also think a lot about the, you know, as a geographer, we think a lot, geography is an interdisciplinary field in general, and we think a lot about kind of the interconnected nature of all of these pieces, right? Society, the economy, the environment are all so deeply interconnected. And I actually think that that's one of the really big opportunities that we have when it comes to AI. AI is better than anything we've ever seen before at modeling that interconnectedness and the complexities of the world. You know, our goal is to create a model of the world so real that it's useful. And that, I think that a big part of that is making sure we've kind of got that in our minds as we're thinking about these solutions, so that we don't think myopically about just the problem that we're trying to solve outside of the context of the rest of it, right? Because then we might come up with a solution that makes things worse over here, and actually we haven't thought through kind of the downstream impacts. But AI really is so well suited to bring together those disparate data sets, to really model the relationships between things in ways that we've never been able to do before, and to really create that genuine model that may actually be useful in driving decisions that are not short-sighted, but really see the downstream impacts and can predict and at least anticipate the downstream impacts, so that we can make sure that we're choosing the right of many possible good options for how we move forward.
And I'm curious, any final thoughts on this specific topic before we move on?
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, to get us to where we are with this grand challenge, there was a lot that had to be done, a lot of conversations, a lot of engagement. I remember at one of our last convenings, someone said, "So what now?" Because we've gotten convened at least 4 or 5 times. Why? And I couldn't announce the grand challenge at the time. But we did a lot of engagement, a lot of thinking about this. And one of the things that I know we got right was ensuring that the climate and nature organizations are the entities that will be applying for the grant, for the work. The idea being that they understand the problems on the ground. The idea being that they've been there, and they have a clear understanding of these challenges and what needs to get done to maximize impact. But what's key is the grand challenge itself is about bringing the AI organizations to the table to partner with these climate and nature organizations who are in the lead. And so I think we got that right. And so I think that starting there, using that as the starting block to do what Lauren and Patrick talked about in terms of human-centered impact is going to be key.
Let's move on to talk a little bit about implementation and scaling. So a lot of AI initiatives in the climate and nature space struggle to progress beyond the pilot stage and achieve widespread impact, which is ultimately what we're hoping to see from the Grand Challenge, is really impact on the ground. Patrick, let's start with you here. Would love to hear what you identify as the primary barriers that have historically hindered or are currently hindering scalability and on-the-ground implementation of AI solutions for climate and nature.
Right. So we are probably all familiar with the basic technical challenges in scaling from, say 500 users to 5 million, or let's say it's, 500 square kilometers to 500 million square kilometers, right? Which is approximately the surface area of the Earth. That's always hard. And yes, there are some challenges there, but we can, AI is mature enough at this point that you can address these kinds of technical challenges in straightforward ways. We see a much more fundamental problem to successful scaling, and that's just the AI doesn't work well once you generalize, right? So you have a great pilot, works well on a small AOI or some small user base, but then it doesn't actually work when you scale. So it's quite simple, right? But you see this again and again across many industries. Healthcare, education, and climate and nature are not no exception there. Humans are great at finding signals in noise, right? Especially if their careers depend on it. And this is relevant, right? When you're trying to address the very big problems, right, that are part of this Grand Challenge, solutions need to scale globally. So lack of data, lack of validation data at global scale in particular, or just more broadly, lack of data to begin with, is contributing, I think, to the lack of innovation and the lack of translation. Benchmark data sets have been a big source of innovation in ML, broadly speaking. What are those universal benchmark data sets for climate and nature? Even just creating these benchmarks, right, is not trivial. What is the appropriate benchmark for an event that hasn't yet happened, right, for forecasting? Or what about like black swan events? In general, when you're modeling the Earth, change is constant, right? You can count on that. Things do not look the same twice, and we're seeing increasingly unprecedented events unfold, right? So we need to think about, how the models are being validated past the pilot stage. And there are going to be massive distributional gaps, right? There's probably far more data for many different types of problems in the global north as opposed to the global south. And that's a major problem if the nations most impacted, for example, are those with the least amount of data. So we want solutions to work past the pilot, of course, like that's what we all want. We need the solutions to scale. But work means different things to different people. And in general, the bar for working can be incredibly high, right? Especially if you are dealing with public policy. You need solutions that are extremely high precision, high recall, very highly accurate models. If people are going to depend on those, right, if it's actually going to be, actionable intelligence. So there are headwinds on top of the solution itself being hard to build. But I want to just touch on one, I think, opportunity with artificial intelligence that is perhaps unique. And kind of enables us to get past this pilot in effective ways. And that is leveraging artificial intelligence for continual improvement, right? So I think people generally overweight the importance of the y-intercept when they're designing solutions, right? The y-intercept in this case being like what the pilot is, right? And they underestimate the value of a positive slope that you can achieve through user feedback. One of the unique features of AI, as opposed to, some other technology, some other tool, is that it can continuously learn from new data, and you can automate that continual improvement, right? And that can be quite special. So, we see a lot of static models, right across academia, industry, many, many different sectors and many different industries. But if you can get your model to continuously improve from users who probably know best, right? There's going to be incentive alignment there, then you can achieve, a lot more, and you can progress. We think that helps you get past the pilot. And I think in general, listening to your users, prioritizing iteration, achieving better and better performance, right? That will be inevitable if you focus on that, positive slope. And for me anyway, I think that's kind of the hallmark of true artificial intelligence.
And I'm curious if you have any reactions or thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, no, Patrick, that was super thoughtful. Thank you for that. What I would add is that in my experience, and doing this primarily across cities and nations, and implementing AI solutions and then looking for them to scale, I think that one of the biggest challenges was ensuring the explainability of that AI. One of the things that we focus on here at the Earth Fund is sort of this partnership between suppliers and demanders, right? Suppliers being the organizations that supply AI, demanders being the organizations that are doing the on-the-ground work, but that believe or would like to understand how AI can scale and grow 5x, 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x their work. And so bringing those two entities together, one of the things that I have seen more times than not is that the suppliers essentially build a prototype, a pilot, and it does something. When you turn it on, it makes a sound and the lights flash and interesting things happen. But what's lost in that is that in order for within this geographic area, and you want to scale to a larger area and scale your impact, in order for that to happen, you have to bring way more people than the handful of partners that you brought on in order to build that pilot. You have to bring them on board, and that's decision makers. Oftentimes that's politicians, business owners, landowners, executives. A wide swath of stakeholders have to be able to look at this pilot that you're looking to scale and say, yes, I understand what that is and what it's going to do when deployed and implemented, and how it's going to help, but then also what are some of the challenges and concerns that are in place. And so oftentimes that conversation is not had, and that explainability, that ability to explain the work and what it is doing and what will happen once it scales. We don't see that, we don't see that as much as we should. It's easy for AI engineers and AI scientists to sort of build something in a lab and say, this thing works and it does what we want it to do. But then explaining that such that the adoption of it can ensure its scale is probably oftentimes harder to do. And so we're hoping with this challenge to bring these suppliers and demanders together to have that conversation around the pilot, but then also around scale.
Lauren, any thoughts on implementation and scalability here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to Patrick's point about often the AI just doesn't work. In my experience, that's usually not because it's not possible, that it's often because we don't have the right people at the table, right? It's because we haven't formulated our question in the right way. Maybe we're not asking a question that matters at all, or we're not applying our technology to the data in a way that actually answers the question that we have, which I think Patrick was getting at in terms of making sure that we've got the right stakeholders kind of centered. And so I think that is definitely a really big piece of this. I think also when it comes to scaling, a big part of, well, there's two big things. One, it's not surprising to me that one wouldn't scale at the adoption level, because what works in one place isn't necessarily what's going to work in another place. And that's not just, I don't mean like a climate model that's global. I mean an application or a solution that you're expecting two completely different governments or two completely different organizations who have two completely different cultures and ways of thinking about things aren't necessarily going to respond the same way to the same incentives or information. And so I think that's also part of, I guess, kind of building these teams. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle that is often left out. I think that we also have to be, I think Patrick's point, and I just want to bring it up again because I think it is so deeply important and also relates to the questions about ethics and equity. It's about, if we're training these models and we're building an understanding on data that's really lopsided, really biased, we're going to end up with a misunderstanding of how things work, and we are going to, we have the potential to kind of do harm. And so I think that there's also a lot of bringing data together that has to happen. And I think just like we're sharing models so openly, there is lots of open data out there, but one of the biggest challenges with all of that data that's out there and open is it's really all over the place. And so teams do this really hard work of stitching together these massive data sets, and then they kind of hold on to them because it is a ton of work to create them, and it's kind of the special sauce that makes things work. But we need to definitely get a lot better and more comfortable sharing those two, and relying on each other, because that data is the key to solving these big problems.
I think that leads us nicely into our final topic here, which is really about teams. And we talked a bit about making sure you have the right people in the room, the right people at the table. And of course, we know, and I think we've heard today, that developing effective AI solutions for climate and nature requires a diverse range of expertise and perspectives, and often some skills that might be overlooked. And so, Lauren, let's start with you here, since you've already started to touch on this a bit. When assembling a project team, what key skills and tools should be prioritized? What do you want to see in the room or at the table?
I think I'll just bring up, we've talked to, we know we need the folks with deep AI expertise. We know we need the nature and climate folks. I think the one that I'll bring up, and I'm very curious to see what Patrick and Amin say, but I think one skill that's really often overlooked is a great storyteller, a great communicator. I think that very much in that thread of adoption, people will not adopt things that they don't trust and understand. And so being able that I see the storytelling and communicating about the work that we do as that final mile of the marathon. And it's like, if you stop before that and it's just like, well, the science is good, the answer is right, the solution does what it's supposed to do, that's good enough. It's not, because it only matters if anybody uses it to actually make an impact. And so that is that final mile. And so being able to kind of translate complex, sophisticated analysis and methodology to decision makers and to the public, because those decision makers are often beholden to the public. And so if the public can't understand it, then it often doesn't make the same impact that we want it to. And so I think having great storytellers on a team that can really help communicate with effective tools. It's about building out applications like dashboards and putting the data on a map so that people can touch it and feel it and see it. And it's not a bunch of tables and charts that feel very impersonal, are some of the ways that I've seen projects really successfully go that final mile and bring people along to adoption.
Yeah, I'll just add a few points to that, which is, great solutions, like great, truly transformative or innovative solutions, they are clearly the result of teamwork, right? It doesn't matter what domain you're in or what industry you're in. It fundamentally comes down to working together and as a team, and not just, any team, but, a team made up of very diverse perspectives and backgrounds. You can't develop great artificial intelligence by just, sitting in a room somewhere, right? And it really requires, I think, extensive collaborations, quite serious collaborations across many different, many different stakeholders, product engineering, UI, UX, obviously, and that's just engineering, right? And then you're talking about like, that's just one very small piece of the overall puzzle. So, I think you have an opportunity here when you're building a new initiative to really create kind of a dream team, right? And so there's a lot that I think is missed by focusing on any one piece of that.
I would add to what Lauren and Patrick said by saying that I think absolutely the team matters and who's at the table matters. There's an additional dimension here, which is how those entities engage with each other, even at the outset, how they engage in the process structured by that's created by which they work. It needs to be deliberate. Even at the beginning, when I was in New York City, when I was chief analytics officer, I ran a team of, data scientists, and we would go from agency to agency and sit with them to understand how best we can work with them. And I used to coin those sit downs, those many sit downs before we ever put one line of code to paper as almost like therapy sessions, right? Sort of understanding the challenges, understanding the concerns, understanding where they have had some successes, but where they would like to have more successes, who's let them down over time, what has let them down over time, their relationship with technology up to that point. All of these things have to be talked about and discussed even at the outset. And that sort of begins to build a relationship between these deep AI scientists and these climate and nature practitioners. And then that has to be the walk that is had. And so, and it has to be a trust relationship that has to be built over time, because neither is going to get it right? Because information has to be shared amongst and between these groups. And oftentimes there's going to be mistakes made and information that's shared that's not useful, and information that's shared that is useful but that wasn't digested in the way that it should have been. But what's key is that there's trust and partnership, and I'll add that that's one of the things that we're working with Luminary Labs and our sort of trusted AI partners to pull together is a cohort and an innovation sprint that begins to sort of create the space where these sorts of conversations can be had, and we can be thinking about these in a deliberate these partnerships and these teams in a deliberate way, right? So just being deliberate about these things is key.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just about at the close of our session. Before we wrap up, Amin, I'm wondering if you have any final words for the folks who've joined here. Many folks are working on or about to start working on their proposals. So anything you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to my colleagues, Lauren and Patrick and Rebecca, for putting on this amazing webinar and having this conversation. To everyone, I would like to say that the way that I would want you to think about your submission and this grand challenge is that the takeaway here is we want to go from big ideas to impact, right? So from ideas to impact. And so think about, for now, for your initial submission, go big ideas. Don't be hampered or slowed up by any questions around technology and so on and so forth. We want big ideas. Force the technology to meet you where you are. Force the AI to be where you are in terms of your big ideas. The challenge here, the grand challenge, and we had to think about this for months and at least a year, the grand challenge is then taking that idea and turning it into impact. That's the grand challenge. It's not some fancy AI technology term concept. The grand challenge is you taking that big idea and pulling this team together. And so if anything, know that that's how we think about this, is ideas to impact.
Great. I think that's a great note to end the session on. I'll echo Amin's thanks. So thank you so much to Lauren and Patrick, and thank you to Amin, of course, for participating in today's AI panel discussion. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Just for a little brief bit of housekeeping, you can watch a recording of this session, which will be published on the Grand Challenge website in the coming days. You can also learn more about the Grand Challenge and about AI by visiting the resources page of the Grand Challenge website. You should see some links in the chat here. And as a final reminder, for those who are working on submissions or who are about to start, proposals are due by July 30th at 5:59 p.m. Eastern Time. That's in 3 weeks. And we're really excited to see your ideas. So thank you so much to everyone for joining, and have a great day.